Well, greetings to you and a very happy new year to my subscribers and to the volunteer researchers who look after me so well, and most of whom, but not all, most of whom I've had a private word with over the Christmas thing, private word of thanks. All very welcome. All your input is very, very welcome indeed, and it all gets looked at. So I thank you for that. Now, I thought it might be useful as we're going into 2026, and we are living in times. I was born in 1949. Times which I have not lived with before. This is new to me. Normally I can have a look at things and take an empirical view, but which helps me to read strategically perhaps the future. And when I look around these days, sadly, at politicians in particular, and various other mainstream media people and editorial, I don't see many people who have had a formal training in matters of strategy, international strategy, military, geopolitical, etc., etc. They have no formal training. So they're all a little bit the man on Clapham omnibus. We're led by the man on the Clapham omnibus, who really doesn't know anything more than he's read in the Daily Express or Daily Telegraph editorial, which was written by the man on the Clapham omnibus. So I thought I'd just run through a few things to look out for. And as I say, I'm a strategist, geopolitical, military and financial, if you will. And my track record over many, many years shows that I'm right in the long term, as a strategist should be, and very wrong sometimes in the short term, which I suppose you might argue is a tactical phenomenon. But there we are. And I'll come to that. I'm not right all the time. I don't pretend to be. But it's interesting to look at a strategic position. Let's just look at geopolitics, geomilitary politics and such like globally at the moment as we go into 2026. And we're only just sort of 24 hours into the invasion, if you will, funny sort of word, we don't quite know what's going on in Venezuela. But we do know one of the reasons, of course, and it's in defence of the petrodollar. And I'm not putting anything here today in order of particular strict priority because they all mesh into one. The world is a great big jigsaw puzzle, and it all fits in here, there and everywhere, not necessarily in any form of chronological order. But we know, do we not? Let's deal with what we know, rather than what we speculate in. We know that the United States is desperately trying to hold the petrodollar. They're trying to hang on to the petrodollar. It's my belief that they are pissing in the wind, but I could be wrong. But obviously the invasion of Venezuela is part and parcel. Regime change, call it what you like, is part and parcel of that. Because Venezuela has the biggest strategic oil reserves on the face of the planet. And as Michael Caine again would have said, not a lot of people know that. So that's very, very important. Which means, what does that tell us? And when you're dealing with strategy, as I learned at the Royal College, you have to, every one of these strategic developments has an impact somewhere else. Sometimes referred to as a butterfly flaps its wings the other side of the world, we all suffer from a hurricane. Actually, it's not an unreasonable statement, that, if you think about it. But if the Americans are going to save the petrodollar, they need control of petro. They want all world oil paid for in dollars, which is a very big target. But certainly they can't ignore Venezuela with the biggest reserves on the face of the planet, especially now as Saudi Arabia and other big oil producing states are now looking towards selling in yuan or gold or even local currencies or regional currencies. All that we know. And the great thing about strategy, you have to work out what you know before you start to speculate. What do you know? So we know that, do we not? If that's the way the Americans are strategically behaving in South America over oil, and very often it's always about oil or money or resources. Wars, you can go back as long as you like, hundreds of years. It's about war and resources. And of course, America is a very powerful nation, it's a very powerful nation. And you might argue that it's a bandit nation. They're robber barons. They're the modern robber barons, as it were. And if they see something, they honestly believe that the oil under Venezuela is theirs. And Trump said as much. It's our oil. In fact, it's under Venezuela. It's got nothing to do with it. It belongs to the Americans. So they need to keep the domain over that amount of oil. And that is something that we know. We also know that the Saudis and Middle East and Far East are moving away. They're forming BRICS, and the BRICS countries are moving in a different direction because they have been blackmailed over dollar currency blackmail in the last decade or so, and they're fed up with it. They're not going to pursue that anymore. They're going a different route. Who could blame them? So these are the problems happening. Of course, the Ukraine war was about resources. It was about regime change in the Russian Federation because they wanted to get their hands on the very, very rich resources of the Ukraine, which is why BlackRock takes such a public interest in all this going on. And of course, the Russian Federation is very rich in resources, and it was an opportunity. They thought if they could break up the Russian Federation and get a regime change, BlackRock, Vanbrugh, and Bill Gates and all the other riffraff and mafia could get their hands on it. It hasn't quite worked out that way, has it? In fact, going back to the college, not Royal College of Defence Studies, but the College of Senior Management, as it were, in the Army, British Army, Staff College at Camberley. They were asked once, there was a lecture by General Montgomery, Field Marshal Montgomery, as he then was, and somebody said, can you give us one line? Give us a one-liner, Field Marshal, before you go, in order not to evade. And he turned around and he said, yes, he said, Field Marshal Montgomery said, yes, never march on Moscow. Never march on Moscow. And it's something that Napoleon would have done well to understand. Hitler would have done well to understand. It is a vast region. Russia is vast. It's huge. And the only way you can understand it in the Western mind, to really understand just how big it is to have some sort of great land journey. And I suspect that none of our politicians, or very few, or very of our feature or editor writers of mainstream media, whether it's BBC or whether it's the newspapers, it doesn't really matter who it is, has ever really taken a really long land journey. They go on long flights, sure. They go sit in a first class in an aeroplane for 14 hours and go long distances. Now I have. And so, in fact, my late elder sister, she went from Moscow to Vladivostok on a train, and I've been to Vancouver to Toronto on a train. And only then do you get a really good understanding of depth of the flatlands that I saw myself going from Vancouver to Toronto. It's day after day after day of rattling along. And even if you're taking, for example, a plane from New York to San Francisco, which I'm quite sure a number of you watching this clip have done, I remember once I dozed off. I dozed off on the plane for about 4 or 5 hours. We were flying over the plains, the Great Plains of North America. And I fell asleep for 4 to 5 hours, and I woke up and looked out of the window, and it was exactly the same. Farm after farm after farm. Nothing had changed. I'd been 5 hours travelling at something like 500 miles an hour, and I looked out the window, nothing had changed. This is what you've got to understand when you're talking about geomilitary politics. The sheer vastness of some of the places, the steppes, the Russian steppes, so on and so forth. Which is why, as I said 3 years ago, and I was accused 4 years ago of being a Putin stooge, as opposed to a professional strategist, which I am, not a Putin stooge, of how it was going to end up. Now, this is where I was wrong. I was right, obviously. It's all basically obvious now that the war is lost, as I said it would be. I was badly out of my timing. I thought the Russians would be prepared to build up quicker and build reserves quicker and be prepared to take very much bigger casualties than they actually were. And Putin was a very, very careful, very cautious man. So consequently, it's taken several years longer. And I think I'm right in saying, if I look back on what I was saying, I'm 2.5 years out. My timing is 2.5 years out. But the end game was inevitable. And I'm in the business of the end game, not what happen at the weekend. And of course, many politicians are only interested in what the Sunday papers might say. They make a statement on the Wednesday and they worry about the Sunday newspapers. That's what they worry about. Nobody is strategic. The Americans are less strategically minded than we are, and the Chinese think of 20, 30 years ahead. The Eastern psyche looks very much further ahead than the Western psyche, which is why we're always in a pickle. And we now have debt, the most extraordinary amount of debt, unprecedented in world history, and no good will come of it. And of course, there's modern monetary theorists who say, oh, debt doesn't matter. Well, I can tell you again, and I'll be right again, which is why I've got no mates. I'll be right again. Debt does matter, and that's going to hit us in 2026 in spades. You cannot live with this level of debt forever and ever. And again, I was wrong. I thought this would come to the fore at least 18 months ago. And I was saying that 18 months ago that it would start to collapse. It's collapsing in 2026. What good came of my forecast then. Well, some good came of it, didn't it? Because the obvious, if you're getting debt to that extent in the Western Hemisphere, it's going to affect your currency, fiat currency, paper currency. And I said, of course, and I was saying this 10 years ago, those of you who bought my book, Magic of Banking, which is a little bit out of date now, but not on the strategic, it's only on the tactical side. On the strategic side, I said that sooner or later paper money would collapse, and paper money is collapsing around our ears as we think. And when it goes, it will go very quickly. Some people think it will go drip, drip, drip. I could be wrong. Drip, drip, drip. Or it will suddenly collapse in one great gobbet. And I think it's going to collapse in one great gobbet when the world suddenly realises that paper money's gone to rat shit. What's happened? Well, in paper currency terms, the price of gold has gone up, as I said it would 5 or 6 years ago. And thank you, by the way, again, for all those messages for people who got my book and followed my lead on stacking up on gold. Yeah, good. That's been really good for everybody, and I'm very glad. It's nothing to me. I don't trade in gold, so it's just advice. Good for you. That's fine. And I think my take on silver will be vindicated. And of course, this is now January 3rd. We don't know yet. It's going to be very volatile, and it's highly manipulated, and that could result in a very quick gallop to make up for the lost ground that silver's had. I don't know, and you can go back and look at my interviews with experts on this particular subject. So we are in a situation where things are rapidly changing, and it's to an extent certainly unprecedented in my lifetime. We're also, to go back to the United Kingdom, we're living in a very interesting time where we have, there's no point in me wrapping this up. I've been thinking about this, how I can actually phrase this. We have a government of psychopaths. A government of psychopaths. Vindictive. Poisonous. They hate great sections of society. They hate the countryside. They hate Middle England. They hate the private sector, the wealth-creating sector. They seem to hate pensioners. They seem to hate everybody, which is the mark calls as a psychopath. Now, the previous administration, some people asked me about the Boris Johnsons of this world and the Rishi Sunaks and the Theresa Mays of this world. They were sociopaths. And if you want to check the difference, have a look. They're sort of two sides of the same kind, but it's worth a look. And I've said before, Boris Johnson now, we're 1 million casualties further in than we were with the peace agreement. Maybe 1.5 million with the peace agreement that was signed in April 2022, and that was torn up by Boris Johnson. It turns out now for quite a significant amount of money. There we are, leaving that aside. So we are in a very, very unprecedented state, and of course it's now collapsing the economy. There is no question at all that mass immigration is a problem. It's got nothing to do with whether they're Islamic or Jewish or it doesn't matter what you are. We're a small island and we just can't go on collecting more and more thousands and thousands of people a week who are going to live on welfare. And the wealth creating sector is slowly departing, especially if you're young. That can't continue. And if something can't continue, it won't continue. And I'm not quite sure what form that will take. But it's looking further and further like it's going to end in violence, which I deprecate. But I mean, sometimes there just is no other way. We had the Civil War, the parliamentarians against the royalists, the violence. Sometimes violence is sadly inevitable because people don't sit round a table and talk to each other. And some people you can't talk to. And again, the mark of the psychopath and sometimes the sociopath is you can't talk to them. And then, of course, we know, do we not, the political dynamic at the moment. We really want somebody in the wings who has a plan. We want a man with a plan. Now, you can be charismatic, you can be articulate, you can be actually pushing against an open door because the current mainstream parties are absolutely hopeless, but there has to be a plan, there has to be a team. And Dominic Cummings said in an interview just a few days ago, there at the moment is no such person, no such team and no such plan. And I'm sorry to tell you the truth about these matters, but that's the fact of the matter. That could change if we've got 3 or 4 years to go. If we have 3 or 4 years to go, which I don't believe we have, I think the collapse will become soon. So what we need is a team with a plan and the right kind of people and the right kind of ethics to go with it. I see no sign of that at the moment, but I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I desperately hope on this one I'm wrong. So there's lots of things to look out for in the coming year, and gradually you see them unfold. May not be in the timeline because my track record on actual timelines, apart from precious metals, is not good. But it's not that bad. So if I tell you it's coming, it will. I just can't tell you when. Anyway, let me repeat. A very good, happy new year to you and your family. And again, thank you for your input that I've had over the year. particularly on the YouTube followers, which is really growing topsy. It doesn't work very much on X because I'm still moderately shadow banned on that one. But never mind. Never mind. Good luck to you and to your family, and I'll speak to you again soon. As most of you know, my work is very heavily independently research based. And I get my information from all over the world. It would help if you press the subscribe button and the little bell next to it, because the more subscribers I have, the more likely it is that international independent research institutes will share their material with me. It's most helpful, and then of course I'll automatically share it with you. So, surprise, won't cost you anything. Thank you very much.